Hopepunk, a genre, philosophy, and movement. Part 1, Introduction. In his book, Ethical Intuitionism, Michael Huebner reflects on how the 20th century saw a large shift from humanism. Psychologists aim to show the world that man is irrational. Psychoanalysis discovered us motivated by lust and other desires. Marxists looked back on history and saw greed and exploitation, and scientists discovered reproduction as consequential to quote-unquote selfish drives.
If you don't, someone else will, so it's fine. It's called holistic consequentialism.
With this newfound knowledge, they concluded that art, philosophy, and religion had deceived humans. We are stupid, shallow, and insignificant. This type of belief has consequences. Your actions are ultimately influenced by how we perceive others and ourselves. If everyone assumes that everyone around them is bad, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Technically, deep down, we all only care about ourselves. Psychological egoism.
If everyone assumes that everyone around them is bad, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you've created a culture with no moral motivation, it tends to result in a deteriorating society. The lens through which we currently view human nature is fundamentally flawed. Rebecca Solnit, in her book A Paradise Built in Hell, which studies human behavior in crises, said, "Even when stripped of all comforts and constraints, we all react in fundamentally different ways." She also found that, contrary to popular belief, most people show qualities like generosity, empathy, courage, and kindness during times of suffering. Viktor Frankl, a psychologist and survivor of the Holocaust, agreed, concluding there is, quote, no innate blueprint in human behavior. He believed that humans are driven by a deep longing for connection and purpose. As he reflected on his time in concentration camps, Frankl analyzed that those, quote, who placed themselves in service of others, who committed themselves to a greater cause, were the ones who found nourishment even in complete deprivation. Aristotle believed that no one is born with complete virtue, but we are all born with the potential to get them. We become virtuous by doing virtuous things.
Well, just guys who do good stuff sometimes and bad stuff sometimes, and all we can do is try to do less bad stuff and more good stuff.
As Aristotle advised, our culture tears them down, contributing to the rise of cynicism, nihilism, and subjectivism. Our media has reflected this in grimdark media, which assumes that everyone at their core is selfish and awful, and that evil is far more likely to triumph over good. From climate change to poverty to inequality, those with power are doing nothing to address these changes. Our collective depression is only made worse through technology, which acts as conduits to a tidal wave of despair, fetishizing our suffering. There's a present bombardment of apocalyptic sensibilities where we're all doomed and there's nothing we can do about it. There's no room for hope.
The world is empty. There is no point to anything, and you're just gonna die. So do whatever.
Many believe it's naive and delusional to believe in the power of hope. The likelihood that we will try to make the world better is directly contingent upon our belief that a better world is achievable. For hopelessness is a dangerous weapon that those in positions of power wield to amass greater control over the public. However, just like despair, hope can be weaponized as well. This has created a shift where creators and consumers alike have been drawn to what author Alexander Rowland has coined, Hopepunk. Part 2, Definition.
僕の友人たちが随分関わっているんですけど、僕は好きではありません。希望を持たないことをひけらかしているから、物の見方が浅い、人間に対する共感が薄い、それから極めて機械的である物事は機械的と分かる。
Despair isn't productive. It only breeds more despair. Quote, despair only worsens our already slim chance at long-term survival. We must fight like there is something to fight for, like we are something worth fighting for, because we are. As we're burned out by the horrors that face the world, and the ones reflected back to us in our media. We also yearn for authentic human stories. This is where the idea of Hopepunk comes to play, defined as the willful, unyielding defiance of cynicism. Hopepunk recognizes how humans can simultaneously be both cruel and capable of kindness and great things. While we can destroy, we also have an innate desire to care for one another and improve the world.
At least that way, we might be able to, together, come across some kind of redemption.
This sentiment is mirrored at the end of film Mad Max Fury Road, when Max and Furiosa decide to risk everything and return to the Citadel. It cements the idea that while mankind isn't fundamentally good, it's not fundamentally terrible either, and that providing people the opportunity to demonstrate compassion is worthwhile. Choosing hope in an age marked with so much suffering becomes an existential act. Rather than feeling meaningless, we can create our own meaning by picking radical kindness and fighting for a better future for others and ourselves. Kindness is a fully self-aware political choice in a world dominated by cynicism and nihilism. The 2020 film Palm Springs is a perfect example of this, magnifying the importance of human connection and resilience, and how finding meaning in a seemingly meaningless world is a tool when striving to overcome your circumstances. Finding meaning in the struggle, crafting solutions via compassion, standing up for what you believe in, and transforming the world into a kinder, more accepting place are all examples of Hopepunk. This idea is put on display in Moana, as the titular main character stands resolute in the face of the looming monster and defeats it not with force, but with empathy, trust, and a desire to reach out and feel the anguish at Te Fiti's heart. Similarly, Avatar: The Last Airbender from the start immerses us in a war-torn world. However, the previous century's cycle of hatred and bloodshed is broken by Zuko's decision to join Team Avatar and atone for his misdeeds, rather than violence. Accepting compassion, in and of itself, is a form of resistance capable of effecting as much change as violent revolution. Instead of facing the darkness head-on, it's much easier to ignore suffering and flock to utopian-like, escapist media. On the other side of the spectrum, apocalyptic fiction can also be cathartic. Both good and evil are destroyed, and the world is finally put to rest. These kinds of stories, however, avoid what lived political experience shows is the hard part, building the new, better system after the evil tower burns or the false utopia's sinister secret is revealed, the part we're living now. Many people are afraid that talking about hope will breed complacency at a time when immediate action is required. However, psychological research indicates the opposite. Michael Mann, for example, claims that climate doom is the new climate denial. When you conclude it's too late, no political action is needed. For a fossil fuel executive, there's no difference between climate deniers and climate doomers. In both instances, there's no resistance to their global harm. We can find hope in the messaging of the film WALL-E, where the singular plant found on Earth serves as a symbol of hope and alludes to the idea that when handled with care, the Earth is actually more adaptable and hospitable than we realize. It's exhausting to hope, but it's even more exhausting to keep working for change. Kurt Vonnegut said, "Everyone wants to build, but nobody wants to maintain." Hopepunk acknowledges how bleak the world is and how much we are all suffering, but works tirelessly as part of the solution to keep hope alive in the face of it all.
Every day it gets a little easier.
Yeah?
But you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part.
We'll never realize utopia. It goes against human nature. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying. It's something we should always strive for, with the understanding that we'll never quite get there.
What purpose does it serve except to remind you that you are incomplete?
It is the struggle itself that is most important. We must strive to be more than we are, Law. It does not matter that we will never reach our ultimate goal. The effort yields its own rewards.
Hopepunk demonstrates resilience by depicting failure, setbacks, and compromise, not as heroic flaws or formative backstories, but as an unavoidable part of taking action in the first place. Part 3. Past academic theory. These sentiments are nothing new, even if the term
hope is about being, doing, enacting, embodying. So in the end, it's not about how sophisticated my discourse on hope was. It's about, at your funeral, she lived a life in which she was a hope. And she generated hope in others.
Hopepunk is reminiscent of many different philosophies, like philosopher John Dewey's meliorism, where the specific conditions which exist at one moment, be they comparatively bad or comparatively good, in any event, may be bettered. Hopepunk mirrors his idea that pessimism is a paralyzing doctrine. Unfounded optimism in a global crisis is naive and dangerous. He advises, accept what has happened, improve what is still to happen, learn not to worry about what you can't influence, while focusing your energy on the smaller or bigger things you still can influence. In other words, look darkness in the eye without getting hypnotized by it, while you hold hope in your hands, doing what you can to make things a little bit better. We have to accept our sadness. Ignoring it makes us part of the problem. Those who choose to ignore the dark side may be freed from nihilism, but find themselves submerged in apathy. They aren't harmed personally by the darkness, but they also aren't fighting against it, and are therefore complicit in allowing the darkness to harm others.
We're all a little bit sad. All the time. And if you try and ignore your sadness, it just ends up leaking out of you.
Finding the meliorism in her situation, in the TV series WandaVision, Wanda tries to escape her sadness for her soulmate Vision, but she finally is able to move forward by addressing her anguish. Using her sadness and suffering as motivation for transformation, Wanda becomes an even more powerful witch, taking the opportunity she has to change her position. Reminiscent of the definition I just gave for Hopepunk, Marxist theory takes the ideas of Hopepunk as a tool for political change, as summarized by journalist Simon Basketter. The Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci argued that revolutionaries must stare reality in the face and find ways to push the class struggle forward. He borrowed the phrase, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, to deal with the problem. As a phrase, it is a powerful warning against wishful thinking and at the same time a cry against resignation. It proposes a determined, open-eyed engagement. Academic terms such as educational hope and critical hope have been examined when thinking about Hopepunk, focusing on how hope can incite powerful acts of gentle rebellion against vertical systems of oppression and injustice, specifically against the marginalized. In the state of despair many are currently in, it's not just that we're sad, we literally can't imagine a better life. Without imagination or the power to summon up alternative conclusions, we can't picture a way out of the darkness. This is what makes speculative resistance via easily ingestible stories such a powerful tool.
I said to draw where Jews live. This is just a stupid picture in my head. Yeah, that's where we live.
We see hope in the media we consume. It is easier to imagine and then enact change in real life. Shows like Parks and Rec and The West Wing, where they're working together to improve bureaucracy for the common good, offer viewers a window into speculative resistance. The West Wing imagines a world in which the most influential politicians in America are individuals of integrity, who entered politics to serve people and make a difference in the world. In both shows, as we see devoted individuals care about one another, working long hours in the best interests of those that they serve, we allow ourselves to envision a similar future. Even shows like The Handmaid's Tale are indicative of this. While the show may seem bleak, its overarching theme is to keep relentlessly fighting against the system they find themselves in, building support systems, embodying the idea that change is possible.
Maybe I should reread my favorite novel, The one about the guy who becomes the last man on Earth after everyone else dies of plague. Well, maybe I'll rewatch my favourite movie. The one about the guy who gets trapped alone on a desert island for years. I know, I'll play that video game. The one where there's a deadly plague and the people in charge ignore it and just send everyone back to work.
In 2017, Hopepunk, which started as a social media post intended as a literary subgenre, transformed into a philosophy indicative of various films, TV, politics, aspects of religion, and lifestyles. Dozens of articles, podcasts, blogs, messenger boards, and even classes have embraced this movement in the years since. Beginning as Trump was elected into office, it has only risen in popularity, especially since the pandemic began. In a study of 2020 streaming trends, consumption of negative or dark content dropped significantly as consumption of more hopeful comedies, animations, and musicals, all in all more heartwarming stories, became some of the top shows streamed. To be cut down countered the collective global turmoil. This was seen in book sales as well. Demand for dystopian fiction aimed at young people, the category's largest group of readers, fell in recent years. Print sales for young adult dystopian novels declined to 850,000 last year from more than 5 million in 2014. Television's most renowned series of the aughts and the 2010s were about bad people doing terrible things. Shows like Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Mad Men, Black Mirror, and Nolan's Batman trilogy come to mind. It was a time when much of our culture's aesthetic attention was focused on what makes people terrible and what it means to be a bad person, as well as the illicit pleasure of watching other people do bad things. It's entertaining to watch shows that are filled with moral squalor. Some of my personal favorite series would be considered grimdark, like It's Always Sunny, Succession, and Rick and Morty.
Newsflash, asshole! I've been hearing it the entire goddamn time! Then why wouldn't you say something? Because I hate you!
You're wet, you're green, you're intellectually insecure, you're not emotionally strong enough, you have addiction issues.
That's enough. I'm not saying I would make a better CEO. That's unsaid.
It's not unsaid when you say it.
It can sometimes feel like we punish ourselves with pop culture we create and consume, as if engaging in fun, hopeful, or kind storytelling is an irresponsible luxury we can't afford, rather than a practice that prepares us for life's complex, devastating, and long-term challenges. In fact, watching and reading hopeful narratives is shown to positively influence our behavior, as on-screen characters inspire us to imitate them in situations that parallel our own.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frugal. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy?
We demand structure from the world, so we impose stories onto the world. Dr. Paul Zak attributes this to the oxytocin in the brain. It doesn't differentiate between actual human beings and flickering images of human beings. So, if it's an optimistic film, we partake in the hero's journey towards hope and resilience, and we walk away feeling like we too can succeed. This can be seen in one of the most famous Hopepunk pieces circulated online, Sam's speech to Frodo at the end of Lord of the Rings.
But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow, even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer.
While Sam acknowledges his despair, he makes a conscious decision to keep moving forward, inspired by characters in great stories. As the two travel towards an ostensibly unachievable objective, Frodo begins to lose hope, but Sam refuses to relinquish his. The strength of that hope is not just a source of strength for himself, but for others around him. We deeply need hope right now, because we're in a very precarious, self-destructive historical moment. I think of Hopepunk as narrative therapy for historical trauma. It's a way to ease pain, to tell stories about the healing process, as well as what has hurt us. Annalee Newitz. Throughout history, film has reflected collective grief, trauma, or anxieties. but after each wave of darkness, a light of positivity emerges. Post-Vietnam War, after The Exorcist, Jaws, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre offered violent catharsis of grief, came the release of Star Wars. Going back even further, towards the end of the bleak Great Depression era, society saw the rise of the on-screen musical, which focused on perseverance and seeking personal happiness despite a lack of wealth, the most influential being The Wizard of Oz. We've seen a similar shift towards hopeful media beginning during the 2016 election, increasing exponentially during the pandemic. The 2020 Emmys were a sweep for Schitt's Creek, and the 2021 Emmys for Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso makes a tangible difference in the lives of practically everyone he comes in contact with. It's easy to say Ted Lasso isn't very observant or intelligent, or that he simply doesn't experience the harsher problems of life in the same way that the majority of all of us do. Though, it quickly becomes clear that his optimistic coaching style is a choice and a discipline that he practices, even more so when confronted with serious problems. The show's positivity draws us in, just as Ted's positivity radiates into the other characters' lives, empowering them to untangle the habits that lead them to get in their own way. Ted's capacity to find the best in everyone remains his superpower, but it only works when he confronts conflict straight on. You can show people the love and the support they deserve, but you have no control over what they do with it. Everybody has the ability for both selfishness and kindness. The choice is ultimately theirs. Part 5. More media examples. Some Hopepunk media includes those like Rogue One or Good Omens, where hope is needed to save their world. In Rogue One, a group of rebels beat unfathomable odds at great personal cost, all because of the strength of their convictions. And in Good Omens, while on the brink of an apocalypse, a millennium of friendship between an angel and a demon motivates them to choose saving mankind over maintaining their respective positions on opposing sides. However, most of the Hopepunk media currently being produced has been largely focused on the internal emotional journey of characters, rather than an external one. In Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Kimmy is a survivor of a life-altering traumatic event. That unbreakability, her tenacity in the face of the worst that may happen, leads to her ultimately being the one teaching others life lessons. The concept to Schitt's Creek was literally, what if the Kardashians lost everything? And the answer is literally the thesis of the show. When people are brought together in an environment without overt prejudice, they learn to love, and they slowly but surely become more human as they find happiness, meaning, belonging, and peace. Like the series-long character growth in Schitt's Creek, She-Ra's Katra is torn between wanting to be a better person and remaining bound to her harmful, trauma-based responses. Because forgiveness and progress are not linear, we witness her backslide, but ultimately, she becomes a better person as she stays adamant about righting her wrongs and in turn flourishes after receiving love and support. Hope in the face of trauma-based healing is an attribute of Doom Patrol, a superhero program that recognizes that the longest and most difficult fights we face are the ones against ourselves. The road to self-forgiveness is arduous, but it is achievable. When we first meet the team, they're downtrodden, just trying to get through the day, suffering as little as possible, attempting to adjust to abilities they believe are curses. Helping others is not on their radar. Their success lies in their steady march towards confronting their demons and then the world, trying to get better on their own terms, regardless of the consequences, as they reluctantly save the world. Surprisingly, shows like End of the Effing World, BoJack Horseman, and even Euphoria are finishing their runs with a Hopepunk philosophy as well.
I don't know if this feeling will last forever, but I am trying. I remember Ali said, the thought of maybe being a good person is what keeps me trying to be a good person. Maybe there's something to that.
End of the Effing World has a pretty grim, dark premise. James, who believes himself to be a psychopath, intends to murder schoolmate Alyssa on a road trip. But as time goes on, instead of highlighting the worst in each other, James and Alyssa's relationship gradually transforms them into better people. It looks at trauma and how to keep going, how to get up every day and find a new cause when it feels like your world is over. BoJack Horseman is also known for its depressing subject matter, but its messaging is clear. Personal improvement is not a straight line, and no matter how many stumbles, as long as BoJack is alive, he can try again.
You turn yourself around. That's what it's all about.
What if I relapse again?
Then you'll get sober again.
Try something else, and you fail again and again, and you fail 1,000 times, and you keep trying, because maybe the 1,001st idea might work.
Part 6. Conclusion. Aristotle believes that it is hope for the good, rather than fear of suffering, that moves us. We find it difficult to change our ways unless we can fully imagine a different way of doing things. That's why speculative resistance can be part of the solution. Your choices can either hurt or help people. Even if you believe your life has no inherent meaning, that everything is random and no one has a purpose, your life and your actions still matter to those who love you, your community, and your ecosystem.
It doesn't matter that everything resets and people don't remember. We remember. We have to deal with the things that we do.
Kenyan philosopher and theologian John S. Mbiti wrote, "The individual does not and cannot exist alone. He owes his existence to other people. He is simply part of the whole. The individual can only say, 'I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am.'" I like to think of hope in terms of Pascal's wager for the atheist. I think it's better to be wrong and do good than be right and do nothing. I'm betting on hope because you have lots to gain and not much to lose. If you have the mindset that the world is like a rock, forever unable to be shaped, only shattered, no one will ever pick it up and the world will never change. But if you're told that the world is like malleable clay, it instead becomes an invitation for creative transformation. You'll turn it into something distinct and superior to its source, greater than the sum of its parts. Let us have faith that the world is a good place, because someday, with our help, it could be.
We survived, as will humanity survive. As long as there's a handful of you to keep the spirit alive, you will prevail, even if it takes a millennium.